The blizzard struck Wyoming Territory with a fury that seemed intent on erasing the world from existence, and Clara Coleman stumbled through it with nothing but the clothes on her back and a desperate prayer that she would find shelter before the cold claimed her life. The wind howled like a wounded animal, driving snow so thick she could barely see her own hands extended before her face, each step forward an act of pure will against a body that begged to simply lie down and surrender to the frozen darkness. She had been walking for what felt like hours since the stagecoach accident, the images of the overturned coach and screaming horses still fresh in her mind. Though whether the driver and other passengers had survived, she could not say, because she had been thrown clear. And when she had regained her senses, the storm had already swallowed everything in white. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves an hour ago, and her feet felt like blocks of ice in her inadequate boots, each breath burning in her lungs as the frigid air cut through her like knives. Clara knew she was going to die out here in this God-forsaken wilderness, 23 years old and alone, having left St. Louis 3 weeks ago with such hope in her heart, traveling west to marry a man she had known only through letters, a merchant in Cheyenne who had promised her a good life and security. Now she would never reach Cheyenne, would never meet Harold Pemberton or discover if his letters had painted a true picture of the life awaiting her, would simply become another casualty of the unforgiving western frontier that cared nothing for the dreams of foolish young women. Through the curtain of snow, she thought she saw a light, faint and flickering, and wondered if it was real or simply her mind creating false hope in its final moments. She pushed toward it anyway because what else could she do, lifting her heavy legs with effort that required every ounce of strength she possessed. And as she drew closer, the light resolved itself into a warm glow emanating from windows, an actual building materializing out of the storm like something conjured from a fairy tale. Clara staggered forward, and her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, sending her sprawling face first into a drift that came up to her chest. She tried to push herself up, but her arms had no strength left, and she felt herself sinking, the cold wrapping around her like a shroud. And she thought this was it, so close to salvation but not close enough, fate's final cruel joke. Then strong hands grasped her shoulders and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, and through her fading consciousness she heard a deep voice say, "I have got you now. Easy does it." And she was being carried, cradled against a broad chest that radiated warmth through layers of heavy wool and leather. She tried to speak, but her jaw would not cooperate, her whole body shaking with violent shivers as she was borne through the storm toward that blessed light. The warmth that enveloped her when they passed through a doorway was so intense it was almost painful, and she heard the voice again, closer now, saying, "Stay with me, you hear? You are going to be all right." She was lowered onto something soft and blankets were piled on top of her. And then those strong hands were removing her boots, rubbing her frozen feet with a gentleness that seemed at odds with their obvious power and capability. "Your feet are nearly frostbitten, but I think we caught it in time," the voice continued, and Clara managed to open her eyes and focus on the man kneeling beside the bed where she lay. He was perhaps 27 or 28 with dark hair that fell nearly to his shoulders, and eyes so blue they reminded her of summer skies, a strong jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard, and a face that was handsome in a rough, weathered way that spoke of years spent outdoors in all kinds of conditions. He wore a simple homespun shirt and leather vest, and when he noticed her looking at him he smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Welcome back," he said. "You gave me quite a scare when I saw you fall out there. I am Xander Hollis, and you are in my home about 5 miles outside of Gila City." Well, that is what we call our little settlement anyway, though it is not much more than a trading post and a few buildings. This is my ranch, such as it is." Clara tried to speak and managed only a croak, her throat raw and painful. Xander immediately reached for a cup on the nearby table and held it to her lips, supporting her head with his other hand. "Slow sips," he instructed, and she obeyed, the water like a miracle flowing down her parched throat. When she had drunk enough, he lowered her head back to the pillow and sat back on his heels, studying her with concern evident in those remarkable eyes. "What is your name?" he asked gently. "Clara," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Clara Coleman." "The stagecoach overturned in the storm. I do not know what happened to the others." His expression grew grave. "When did this happen?" "Hours ago, I think. I walked and walked, but I could not find the road again. Everything looked the same." Xander stood and crossed to the window, peering out into the storm that showed no signs of abating. "This blizzard has been building all day. I had a feeling it was going to be a bad one, which is why I made sure to have extra wood stacked and supplies brought in. First rule of surviving a Wyoming winter is to always be prepared for the worst." He turned back to face her. "I would go out looking for the others, but in this weather, I would be dead inside an hour, and I would be no good to you or anyone else frozen solid. We will have to wait until the storm breaks." Clara felt tears stinging her eyes, thinking of the driver who had been kind to her, an older man with a thick mustache who had helped her with her trunk at every stop, and the other passenger, a severe-looking woman in her 50s who had barely spoken 2 words the entire journey but who had not deserved to die in the cold. "They might still be alive," she said. "They might," Xander agreed, though his tone suggested he did not hold out much hope. "But right now my concern is you. How are you feeling? Any numbness remaining in your fingers or toes?" Clara wiggled her toes experimentally and found that sensation was returning, albeit accompanied by a fierce tingling that was quite unpleasant. "They hurt," she admitted. "That is actually a good sign. Means the blood is flowing again. You were very lucky. Another 10 minutes out there, and you would have been in serious trouble." He moved to the stove that dominated one corner of the single large room that seemed to serve as kitchen, living area, and bedroom all in one. "I've got some stew warming. You need to get some food in you." As Clara's body continued to thaw and her awareness sharpened, she took stock of her surroundings. The cabin was rustic but well-maintained, with sturdy log walls chinked against the wind and several windows that would no doubt let in ample light on a clear day. A large stone fireplace supplemented the iron stove, and the furnishings were simple but solid, clearly made by hand. Blankets and furs covered the bed where she lay, and she realized with some embarrassment that she was still fully clothed except for her boots. Xander returned with a bowl of stew that smelled absolutely heavenly, beef and vegetables in a rich broth that made her stomach clench with sudden hunger. He helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back, and handed her the bowl with a spoon. "Eat slowly," he cautioned. "Your body has been through an ordeal." Clara took a small bite and nearly moaned at how good it tasted, savoring the warmth that spread through her chest as she swallowed. "This is wonderful," she said. "Just simple fare. I am no fancy cook, but I can keep myself fed well enough." Xander pulled up a chair and sat down, his long legs stretched out before him. "So, Clara Coleman, what brings you to Wyoming Territory in the middle of December? That does not seem like the wisest time to be traveling, if you do not mind me saying so." Clara felt her cheeks warm with a blush that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. "I was traveling to Cheyenne, to meet a man I was going to marry." Something flickered across Xander's face, too quick to identify. "I see. And this man, he was expecting you." Yes, I sent him a telegram from the last town with my arrival date. He will be worried when I do not appear." She paused, then added quietly, "Though truthfully I am not certain he will be worried so much as inconvenienced. Our acquaintance has been entirely through correspondence. We have never actually met in person." "A mail-order bride arrangement, then," Xander said, and there was no judgment in his tone, merely acknowledgment of a fact. Such arrangements were common enough in the West, where men outnumbered women by significant margins in many areas. "Something like that, yes. My parents died last year within months of each other, my mother of consumption and my father of a broken heart, I think. I had no other family in St. Louis and limited means to support myself. When Harold's advertisement appeared in the newspaper, marriage seemed like a practical solution." She took another spoonful of stew, not looking at Xander as she continued. "Perhaps not the most romantic way to begin a life together, but romance seemed a luxury I could not afford." Xander was quiet for a long moment, and when Clara glanced up, she found him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You deserve romance," he said finally, and the simple sincerity in his voice made her heart do an odd little skip. "Every woman deserves that, practical considerations notwithstanding." Before Clara could formulate a response to this unexpected statement, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows and sent a shower of snow down the chimney with a hiss. Xander rose and went to check the door, ensuring the bar was secure, then added more wood to both the stove and the fireplace. "This storm is going to rage all night by the feel of it," he said. "We are well stocked, though, and this cabin has weathered worse. You are safe here." The word safe resonated through Clara in a way that surprised her. When had she last felt truly safe? Not on the stagecoach, certainly, always aware of the dangers that lurked on frontier roads, the possibility of accidents or bandits or hostile encounters. Not in the months after her parents' deaths, when she had been forced to take work as a seamstress in a factory, enduring the unwanted attentions of the foreman and the grinding poverty that threatened to consume her. Perhaps not even in her childhood home, loving though it had been, because there had always been the awareness of her father's failing business and her mother's declining health, the sense of security slowly eroding like a riverbank in spring flood. But here, in this simple cabin with this man who was a stranger but who had carried her out of the storm and tended to her with such care, she felt safe in a way that reached deep into her bones. It was irrational, perhaps, given that she knew nothing about Xander Hollis beyond his name and his kindness, but Clara had learned to trust her instincts, and right now every instinct told her that she could trust this man. "Thank you," she said softly, "for saving my life. I would have died out there if not for you." Xander turned from the fireplace and his eyes met hers across the room. "I would not let that happen, not on my watch, not while I drew breath." He said it with such conviction that Clara believed him absolutely, and something shifted in her chest, a crack appearing in the protective walls she had built around her heart. She finished her stew, and Xander took the bowl, bringing her more water and insisting she drink it all. "You are likely dehydrated from your ordeal. Need to get fluids in you." He was right, she realized, drinking gratefully, and by the time she had emptied the second cup her eyelids were growing heavy, exhaustion crashing over her now that she was warm and fed and safe. "You should rest," Xander said, noting her drooping eyes. "Your body needs to recover. I will sleep in the chair by the fire, and if you need anything during the night, just call out." "I cannot take your bed," Clara protested, though the thought of lying down properly was almost unbearably appealing. "You already are taking it, and I will hear no argument on the matter. I have slept in far worse places than a comfortable chair, I assure you." His tone brooked no disagreement, and Clara was too tired to mount a proper protest. She settled back into the pillows, and Xander pulled the blankets up to her chin, his hands gentle but impersonal. "Sleep well, Clara Coleman. You are safe now, and when the storm passes, we will figure out what comes next." Clara wanted to say something more, to express the gratitude and the strange sense of connection she was feeling, but sleep was already pulling her under like a riptide. Her last conscious image was of Xander settling into the chair, his strong profile lit by firelight, and the thought that drifted through her fading awareness was that she had never seen anyone who looked quite so much like safety personified. She dreamed of snow and cold, of wandering through endless white emptiness, but always in the dreams there was a light ahead and a voice calling her home, and she woke in the gray pre-dawn with tears on her cheeks and a profound sense of having been lost and found all at once. The cabin was warm and quiet, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft whistle of wind outside. The storm still raged, but seemed to have lost some of its earlier fury. Clara turned her head and saw Xander asleep in the chair, his head tilted back and his breathing deep and even, and she took the opportunity to study him more closely in the growing light. He was taller than she had initially realized, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who performed hard physical labor regularly. His hands, clasped loosely in his lap, were work-roughened but well-shaped, and she remembered how gentle they had been removing her boots and tending her frozen feet. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow and another along his jaw, marks of some past injury, and his face, even in sleep, had a quality of watchfulness to it, as though some part of him remained always alert to danger. As if sensing her regard, his eyes opened, going from sleep to full awareness with a speed that confirmed her impression of constant vigilance. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Clara answered, and it was true. Her body still ached and her feet were tender, but the bone-deep cold was gone and she felt more herself than she had since the accident. "Much better, actually, thanks to you." Xander stood and stretched, his spine popping audibly. "Good to hear. I will get the stove built up and make some breakfast. Coffee sound good." "Wonderful." Clara sat up more fully, aware that her hair had come completely loose from its pins and was hanging in tangled waves around her shoulders, and that her dress was badly wrinkled and still damp in places. She must look absolutely disreputable, but Xander gave no sign of noticing or caring about her disheveled state. He moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency, stoking the fire and setting a pot of coffee to boil, then mixing batter for what appeared to be pancakes. Clara watched him work, struck by how comfortable he seemed in the domestic sphere, very different from her father who had been helpless in the kitchen and dependent on her mother for every meal. "How long have you lived here?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "About 4 years now. I came out from Ohio after the war, looking for a fresh start like so many others. Tried my hand at various work, prospecting and cowboying mostly, then saved enough to buy this piece of land and start running cattle. It is not much yet, just about 50 head, but I am building slowly. This country is not kind to those who try to expand too fast." "You were in the war then?" Clara asked carefully, knowing it could be a sensitive subject. "I was. Enlisted in 63 when I turned 18, mustered out in 65. Saw more than I cared to see, lost friends I will never forget. When it was over I could not go back to Ohio, could not stand the thought of being hemmed in by familiar streets and pitying looks from people who had known me before. Needed space and sky and room to breathe." He flipped the pancakes with a deft motion. "Out here a man is judged by what he does now, not where he came from or what he has done in the past. I like that. Clara understood that sentiment more than he knew. Part of what had driven her to accept Harold Pemberton's proposal had been the desire for a clean slate, a place where she could be someone other than the poor orphaned girl struggling to make ends meet in a city that seemed designed to grind down anyone without money or connections. Xander plated the pancakes and brought them to the small table, gesturing for Clara to join him. She rose from the bed carefully, testing her feet, and found that while they were sore, she could walk without too much difficulty. She settled into the chair across from him, and he poured coffee into 2 tin cups, the steam rising between them like incense. The pancakes were good, simple but filling, and they ate in companionable quiet for several minutes. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but the gray light filtering through the windows was growing stronger, suggesting that full daylight was not far off. The storm should blow itself out by this afternoon, if I am reading the signs correctly, Xander said, as if reading her thoughts. Once it clears enough, I will ride out and see if I can find any trace of that stagecoach or the other passengers. Then we will need to get word to the stage line and to Gila City. Let folks know what happened. And I suppose I will need to continue on to Cheyenne, Clara said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. The truth was that sometime during the long night, her enthusiasm for meeting Harold Pemberton had drained away entirely, leaving only a sense of obligation and a growing dread at the thought of binding herself to a man she did not know. Xander's eyes met hers over the rim of his coffee cup. "Is that what you want to do?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that Clara was not sure she was ready to examine. "It is what I agreed to do," she said carefully. "Harold is expecting me. He has made arrangements, secured a marriage license. It would be terribly unfair to simply not appear." "Fair to whom, though?" Xander set down his cup. "Forgive me if I am overstepping, Clara, but I have to say my piece. I do not know this Harold Pemberton, but I do know that you do not sound like a woman excited to meet her future husband. And I think that matters, practical considerations aside." Clara felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "What I want has never much mattered in the grand scheme of things. What matters is survival, security, having a roof over my head and food in my belly. Harold can provide those things." "So can you, given the chance and the means," Xander countered. "You strike me as someone who is stronger than you give yourself credit for, Clara Coleman. You survived that stagecoach accident and walked through a blizzard that would have killed a lesser person. That takes courage and grit. Those qualities will serve you better in this life than any marriage of convenience ever could." His words stirred something in Clara. A spark of the person she had been before loss and hardship had taught her to settle for safety over dreams. "I was a teacher before my parents died," she heard herself say. "Just at a small school for girls, teaching reading and arithmetic and a bit of history. I loved it, being in that classroom, watching young minds open to new ideas. But when my circumstances changed, I could not keep the position. The school required its teachers to be beyond reproach, and a single woman with no family and no resources was not considered respectable enough." "That is absurd," Xander said with real heat in his voice. "Your circumstances should have made them want to help you, not cast you out. The world is not always fair, as I am sure you know from your own experience." Clara wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I am sorry. I do not mean to burden you with my troubles. You have already done so much for me." "You are not a burden," Xander said firmly. "And for what it is worth, I think any school would be lucky to have you as a teacher. Hell, Gila City could use a school if we ever hope to become a real town." Right now, anyone with children has to teach them at home or send them away to relatives elsewhere for education. An idea was forming in Clara's mind, tentative and frightening, but also thrilling in a way she had not felt in a very long time. Is that true? There is no school at all. None. We have maybe 8 or 9 families in the area with children, and more arriving every season. The folks at the trading post have talked about trying to start a school, but nobody has the education to teach properly. Most of us out here are fairly rough characters without much in the way of formal learning. Clara's heart was beating faster. What if I stayed? What if instead of going to Cheyenne, I stayed in Gila City and started that school? Xander leaned back in his chair, studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken further. I think that would be a fine thing, but you would need lodging, supplies, some way to support yourself until the school was established and could pay you something. That is not an easy road you would be choosing. Harder than marrying a stranger and spending the rest of my life wondering what if, Clara challenged. At least this way I would be choosing my own path, making my own decisions about my life. A slow smile spread across Xander's face, and Clara's breath caught at how it transformed him from merely handsome to absolutely devastating. You are right, and for what it is worth, I think you should do it. I think you should stay. You barely know me, Clara pointed out, though her own smile was matching his. How can you be so certain? I am a good judge of character, and I trust my instincts. My instincts tell me that you showing up on my doorstep in the middle of a blizzard was not just random chance. Maybe it was fate or providence or just plain luck, but either way I am glad you are here. He paused, then added quietly, and I would be even gladder if you chose to stay. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility and something deeper that Clara was almost afraid to name. This man who had saved her life, who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who looked at her like she mattered, like her dreams and desires were worthy of consideration, was offering her something she had not dared to hope for since her parents' deaths. A chance to build a real life on her own terms. Then I will stay, she said, and felt the rightness of the decision settle into her bones. I have no idea how I will manage it all, but I will stay and start that school and make a place for myself here. Xander reached across the table and took her hand, his palm warm and calloused against hers. You will not be doing it alone. I will help however I can, and so will the others in Gila City once they know what you are planning. This community may be small, but folks look out for each other. That is how we survive out here. Clara looked down at their joined hands and felt something shift and settle in her chest, as though pieces of herself that had been scattered were finding their way back together. I will need to send word to Harold, explain what happened and apologize for the trouble I have caused him. I will ride into Gila City once the weather clears and send a telegram for you, Xander offered. Make sure he knows you are safe but that you will not be continuing on to Cheyenne. Thank you. I imagine he will be angry and he has every right to be. I have treated him poorly. You have treated him honestly, which is more than some would do. Better to call off an engagement now than to enter into a marriage with regret already in your heart. Xander gave her hand a gentle squeeze before releasing it. And who knows, maybe he will be relieved. Maybe he was having second thoughts himself, but felt obligated to go through with it. You might be doing you both a favor. It was a generous way to view the situation, and Clara appreciated Xander's attempt to make her feel less guilty even if she suspected Harold would not see it quite so charitably. But she had made her decision and she would stand by it, whatever the consequences might be. The day passed slowly as the storm continued to batter the cabin. Though true to Xander's prediction, the wind began to ease by mid-afternoon, and the snow tapered off to occasional flurries. Clara found herself relaxing in Xander's company in a way that surprised her, their conversation flowing easily across a range of topics. He told her about his cattle and his plans for the ranch, about the challenges of ranching in Wyoming Territory, where winters could be brutal and water rights were a constant source of conflict. She told him about her students in St. Louis, about the satisfaction of seeing a child's face light up when they finally understood a difficult concept, about her dreams of creating a school that would be more than just rote memorization, but would encourage curiosity and critical thinking. "You really love teaching," Xander observed as evening approached, and he prepared another simple meal, this time beans and bacon with cornbread. "I do. It feels like important work, shaping young minds, giving children tools they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. My own mother was a teacher before she married, and she always told me that education was the greatest gift anyone could receive, that it could never be taken away once you had it." Clara's voice softened with memory. "She made sure I had every opportunity to learn, even when money was tight. I think she always hoped I would teach, carry on her legacy in some way. She would be proud of you," Xander said, "for surviving, for choosing your own path, for being brave enough to start over in a new place with nothing but your determination to see you through." "I hope so. I hope both my parents would be proud." Clara blinked back the tears that threatened, still surprised by how grief could ambush her at unexpected moments even more than a year after her losses. Xander seemed to sense her emotional state and tactfully changed the subject, asking her opinion on the best approach for recruiting students, and whether she thought it would be better to hold classes in someone's home initially or to try to build a dedicated schoolhouse right from the start. Clara appreciated both the distraction and his genuine interest in her ideas, and they spent the rest of the evening planning the logistics of starting a frontier school with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for much grander enterprises. By the time they prepared for sleep again, Clara felt as though she had known Xander for months rather than barely a day. There was an ease between them that suggested a deeper compatibility, and she found herself watching him as he banked the fires and checked the windows, memorizing the way he moved, the sound of his voice, the rare smiles that made her heart do foolish things. "You should take the bed again," he said, anticipating her protest. "You are still recovering and you need proper rest. We can discuss other arrangements tomorrow once we get to Gila City and figure out where you will be staying long term." "I hate to put you out of your own bed 2 nights running," Clara said, though she had to admit the thought of sleeping in that comfortable bed again was very appealing. "Trust me, I am fine. I spent 2 years sleeping on the ground during the war, often in mud or snow or both. A chair by a warm fire is luxury by comparison." He helped her settle under the blankets again, his hands lingering perhaps a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Sleep well, Clara. Tomorrow starts your new life." Clara caught his hand before he could pull away. "Xander, I just want to say again how grateful I am. You saved my life, yes, but you have also given me hope when I thought I had none left. That is no small gift." He looked down at their joined hands, then met her eyes, and what she saw in his face made her breath catch. "The gift goes both ways. I have been alone out here for a long time, Clara. I chose that, wanted it even after the war. But sometimes loneliness becomes a habit and you forget there are other ways to live. You reminded me of that, so thank you." He withdrew his hand gently and returned to his chair, and Clara lay in the darkness listening to the fire crackle and Xander's steady breathing and feeling more alive than she had in longer than she could remember. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges lay ahead in establishing herself in this rough territory, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice in staying. Sleep came easier this second night, untroubled by dreams, and she woke to bright sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee brewing. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world transformed into a pristine white landscape that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. Xander was already up and dressed in heavy outdoor clothes, preparing to venture out. "Morning," he greeted her with a smile. "I am going to saddle up and ride out, see if I can find that stagecoach. You should stay here where it is warm and safe. I will be back as soon as I can, hopefully with good news about the other passengers." Clara nodded, understanding the necessity but wishing she could accompany him. "Be careful out there. I do not want to lose my rescuer to the very thing he saved me from." "I am always careful. It is how I have survived this long." He pulled on heavy gloves and a thick coat, then added a rifle to his gear. "There is food in the pantry if you get hungry, and keep the fires going. Do not go outside for any reason. The snow is deep, and you could get disoriented quickly even in clear weather if you do not know the land." "I will stay put, I promise." Clara rose from the bed and on impulse crossed to him, standing on her toes to press a quick kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for everything." Xander's hand came up to touch the place where her lips had been, and his eyes were wide with surprise and something else, something warm and wondering. "I will be back soon," he said, his voice slightly rough, and then he was out the door, leaving Clara alone in the cabin with her racing heart and the realization that she was falling for this man with a speed that should have terrified her, but somehow felt like the most natural thing in the world. She busied herself with tidying the cabin, washing the breakfast dishes and making the bed properly, trying not to worry about Xander out in that frozen landscape. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness, and Clara found herself constantly going to the window to scan the white expanse for any sign of his return. It was past noon when she finally spotted a dark figure on horseback approaching the cabin, and her heart leapt with relief. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was not alone. A second horse followed, and across its saddle lay what appeared to be a body. Clara did not wait for Xander's instructions about staying inside but threw open the door and rushed out into the snow, which came up nearly to her knees in places. Xander saw her and called out, "I found them. The driver is dead, but the other passenger, the woman, she is alive. Barely, but alive." Together they got the unconscious woman into the cabin and onto the bed. She was in terrible shape, her face gray and her breathing shallow, but when Xander pressed his fingers to her throat he found a pulse. "She is frozen through. We need to warm her slowly, just like we did with you. Clara, get some blankets while I remove her wet clothes." They worked together efficiently, stripping off the woman's frozen garments and wrapping her in dry blankets, building up the fire and preparing warm liquids for when she regained consciousness. It took hours of careful tending, but finally the woman's color began to improve and her breathing deepened into something more like natural sleep. "She is going to make it," Xander said with relief evident in his voice. "That was close. Another hour and she would have been beyond help." "The driver?" Clara asked quietly. "Dead when I found him, frozen solid. He must have died soon after the accident. I marked the location and will go back with proper equipment to retrieve his body for burial once we get her stabilized." Xander scrubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "The stagecoach is a total loss, overturned in a ravine. Your trunk was still there, though, mostly intact. I will bring it back on my next trip out." Relief rushed through Clara at the thought of recovering her possessions, meager though they were. "Thank you for going out there, for finding them. I know it was not easy. It was necessary. Could not leave them out there." He looked at the sleeping woman. "Do you know her?" You were traveling together. No, we barely spoke during the journey. I know her name is Mrs. Edith Carver, and she was traveling from Omaha to visit her sister in Utah Territory, but that is all she told me. Clara checked the woman's pulse again, relieved to find it stronger. She is going to be confused and frightened when she wakes. We should probably take turns sitting with her. They spent the rest of the day and evening tending to Mrs. Carver, who drifted in and out of consciousness, but seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour. When she was finally lucid enough to understand what had happened, she wept for the driver and thanked Xander and Clara repeatedly for saving her life. "You are safe now," Clara assured her, holding the older woman's hand. "You are going to recover fully, and we will make sure you get where you need to go once you are strong enough." It was late into the night before they were certain Mrs. Carver was stable enough to be left to sleep unattended. Xander had given up his bed to their patient, so Clara insisted he take the other bed while she took the chair, ignoring his protests. "You have been out in the cold all day and you are exhausted," she said firmly. "I am rested and I am perfectly comfortable in this chair. Please, Xander, just accept help when it is offered." He looked like he wanted to argue further but finally nodded, too tired to fight. "Just for a few hours. Wake me if anything changes with Mrs. Carver." Clara watched him fall almost instantly into deep sleep, and felt a fierce wave of affection and protectiveness wash over her. This good, kind man who put others before himself, who rode out into dangerous conditions to search for strangers, who opened his home and gave his bed to those in need, deserved to be cared for as much as he cared for others. The next few days fell into a pattern as Mrs. Carver continued to recuperate, and they all waited for the roads to become passable enough for travel to Gila City. The cabin that had seemed spacious with just 2 occupants felt considerably more crowded with 3, but they managed well enough, everyone pitching in with chores and meals. Clara learned that Mrs. Carver was a widow whose husband had died in a mining accident 5 years prior, and that she had been making her slow way west to live with her younger sister who had married a shopkeeper in Salt Lake City. "I have nothing to keep me in Omaha anymore," she explained. "All my children are grown and scattered, and I wanted to spend my remaining years with family while I still can." "We will get you there," Xander promised. "As soon as the roads clear enough for safe travel, I will take you both to Gila City and we will arrange for you to continue your journey." "Both of us?" Mrs. Carver looked between Clara and Xander with obvious curiosity. "I had thought you two were married, the way you worked together so naturally." Clara felt herself blush. "No, we only just met. I was on that same stagecoach, heading to Cheyenne to marry, but I have decided to stay in Gila City instead and start a school." Mrs. Carver's eyebrows rose. "Quite a change of plans. And you're intended in Cheyenne. What does he think of this new arrangement?" "He does not know yet. I am sending him a telegram as soon as we reach town." Clara was not looking forward to that communication, but there was no help for it. She had made her choice and she would stand by it. The older woman studied Clara with sharp eyes that missed very little. "Starting over in a new place takes courage, especially for a woman alone. I admire that. I hope you find happiness here, dear." "I think I will," Clara said, her eyes going to Xander, who was tending the fire across the room. "I already feel more at home here than I have anywhere since my parents died." Mrs. Carver followed her gaze and a knowing smile crossed her weathered face, but she said nothing more, for which Clara was grateful. Whatever was developing between her and Xander was too new and fragile to be examined too closely. A seedling that needed time and care to grow strong. On the 5th day after the storm, Xander declared the roads passable enough for travel, and they prepared to make the journey to Gila City. He hitched 2 horses to a small sleigh he had stored in the barn, and they bundled Mrs. Carver warmly for the trip. Clara wore her own somewhat repaired clothing and felt a flutter of nervousness as they set out across the pristine snow-covered landscape. "How far is it?" she asked, seated next to Xander on the driver's bench while Mrs. Carver rode in the back surrounded by blankets and heated stones wrapped in cloth to keep her warm. "About 5 miles. Should take us an hour or so in these conditions. The road is rough, but the sleigh handles it better than a wagon would." Xander guided the horses with practiced ease, and Clara found herself studying his profile again, the strong line of his jaw, the way his eyes scanned the landscape constantly, always alert to potential danger. He caught her looking and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "Just that I am lucky you are the one who found me in that storm. I cannot imagine how different things would be if I had stumbled upon someone else's door or upon no door at all." "I am the lucky one," Xander said quietly. "That storm brought you into my life, Clara Coleman, and I am grateful for it even though I know you went through hell to get here." The simple honesty of his words made Clara's throat tight with emotion, and she had to look away before she did something foolish like cry or kiss him in front of Mrs. Carver. There would be time later, she told herself, time to explore these feelings that were growing stronger with each passing day, time to see if what existed between them was as real and lasting as it felt in her heart. Gila City proved to be exactly as Xander had described it, a rough collection of buildings clustered around a trading post that served as the community's unofficial center. There were perhaps 20 structures in total, some clearly homes while others were workshops or storage buildings. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and as they entered the settlement, people began emerging from doorways to see who was arriving. Xander pulled the sleigh up in front of the trading post, and immediately they were surrounded by curious townspeople, all talking at once and asking questions about where they had been and who Clara and Mrs. Carver were. Xander handled the barrage with calm authority, explaining about the stagecoach accident and introducing Clara and Mrs. Carver to the assembled crowd. A large woman with steel gray hair and a commanding presence pushed to the front. "Mercy! What a terrible ordeal! You poor dears must be exhausted." "I am Dorothy Finch, and I run the trading post with my husband Henry. You will both stay with us until we get proper arrangements sorted out." "That is very kind of you," Clara said, grateful for the warm welcome. "I do not want to impose, though." "Nonsense, it is no imposition at all. We have a spare room and you are welcome to it." Dorothy turned to Xander. "You did well bringing them in safely. I suppose you will want to send word about the accident to the stage line. That and several other things. Is the telegraph working?" "Should be, unless the storm brought down the lines. You know where to find it." Dorothy turned back to Clara and Mrs. Carver. "Come along now, let us get you inside where it is warm. Henry, help these ladies down and bring their things." Clara found herself swept into the organized chaos of the trading post, which was warm and crowded and smelled of leather and coffee and tobacco. Dorothy installed them in a cozy room off the main living quarters and brought them hot soup and fresh bread, all while keeping up a steady stream of conversation that required minimal response from her guests. Later, after Mrs. Carver had been settled for a nap, Dorothy pulled Clara aside. "Xander mentioned you are thinking of starting a school here. Is that true?" "It is. I was a teacher in St. Louis before I came west, and I understand there is a need for a school in Gila City." Dorothy's face lit up. "A need? Dear girl, it is practically a crisis. We have children running wild because their parents have no time to teach them properly, being busy with the work of survival. If you truly mean to establish a school, you will have the gratitude and support of every family in this territory." "I do mean it. though I confess I am not entirely sure how to go about it. I will need a location to hold classes, supplies, some way to support myself financially until the school is established. We will figure all that out. Come, let me introduce you to some of the other women. We will call a meeting this evening, get everyone together who has children or who might be interested in supporting a school. I guarantee you will not lack for help once folks understand what you are proposing. True to Dorothy's word, by evening the main room of the trading post was packed with families eager to hear about Clara's plans. She stood before them, nervous but determined, and explained her background and her vision for creating a proper school that would serve all the children in the area. "I know this will not be easy," she concluded. "Starting from nothing never is, but I believe every child deserves a proper education, and I am committed to making that happen here in Gila City if you will have me." The response was overwhelming. Parents pledged their support, offering everything from supplies to labor to small financial contributions. A young couple named Samuel and Martha Green offered the use of a small building they owned that had previously served as storage, saying it could be converted into a schoolhouse with some work. Others promised to help with that work, and by the end of the evening Clara had the beginnings of a real plan taking shape. Xander, who had been standing at the back of the room throughout the meeting, caught her eye and gave her a smile that made her heart soar. When the crowd finally dispersed, and she found a moment to speak with him privately, he took both her hands in his. "You were magnificent up there. I could see how much this means to you, and I could see how much it is going to mean to this community. You are going to change lives here, Clara." "I hope so. I want to make a difference to give these children opportunities they might not otherwise have." She looked up at him, acutely aware of his hands holding hers, the warmth in his eyes. "I could not have done any of this without you. You gave me the courage to choose this path." "You had the courage all along. I just helped you see it." Xander paused, then said carefully, "I sent the telegram to your Harold Pemberton, explained about the accident and that you would not be continuing to Cheyenne. Tried to be as polite about it as possible under the circumstances." "Thank you. I am sure he will not be pleased, but it could not be helped." Clara took a deep breath. "Xander, I know this is fast and probably foolish, but I need to say something. These past days with you have been the happiest I can remember in a very long time. You make me feel safe and valued and like I matter, like my dreams and goals are worth pursuing. I do not know what the future holds, but I know that I want you in it if you are willing." Xander's eyes widened, and then that devastating smile spread across his face. "Clara Coleman, I have been trying to figure out how to say something similar without scaring you off. The truth is I have been alone by choice for years, convinced that I was better off that way after everything I saw during the war. But then you stumbled out of that blizzard and into my life, and suddenly alone seems like the last thing I want to be." He pulled her closer, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "I am falling in love with you. I know it is too soon to say such things, that we barely know each other, but I have never been one to hide from the truth. You are everything I did not know I was looking for, and I want the chance to see where this leads if you do." Clara felt tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "I am falling in love with you too. And yes, I want to see where this leads. I want that more than anything." Xander kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise, and Clara felt like she was home in a way that had nothing to do with buildings or geography, and everything to do with this man who had saved her life and given her hope and made her believe in possibilities she had thought lost forever. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a bit unsteadily, Xander rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably court you properly, take things slow, but I already know what I want. Marry me, Clara. Build this life with me, teach these children, and help this community grow. Make this wild, rough country into a home we can share together." "Yes," Clara said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Xander Hollis. Today, tomorrow, whenever you want." He laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. "Maybe we should wait at least until we can arrange for a proper wedding. Give folks time to get used to the idea. Let them see that this is real and not just some hasty decision made in the aftermath of a crisis." "How long do you think that will take?" Clara asked with a smile. "I am thinking maybe a month." "Long enough to be respectable, short enough that I do not go crazy waiting to make you my wife." "A month sounds perfect." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking late into the night about the school and the ranch and the life they would build together. Clara felt drunk on happiness, barely able to believe how dramatically her circumstances had changed in such a short time. 1 week ago, she had been on a stagecoach heading toward a marriage of convenience with a man she did not know. Now she was engaged to marry a man she loved, about to start a school in a frontier settlement, building the kind of life she had only dared to dream about. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Work began on converting the Greens building into a proper schoolhouse, with Xander taking a leading role in the construction, and Clara working alongside him whenever she could. The physical labor was exhausting but satisfying, and she loved watching the space transform under their collective efforts. Mrs. Carver remained in Gila City longer than planned, recovering her strength and helping Clara prepare for the school's opening. "I am in no rush to continue west," she explained. "My sister knows I am safe, and I find I am enjoying being useful again. Let me help you get everything organized before I move on." Clara was grateful for the assistance and for the older woman's friendship. Mrs. Carver had a practical wisdom born of long experience, and her advice on everything from discipline strategies to supply management proved invaluable. True to Xander's prediction, the community quickly embraced Clara's presence and her engagement to Xander. If anyone thought their courtship unusually rapid, they kept such opinions to themselves, and most seemed genuinely delighted that the solitary rancher had found someone to share his life with. Dorothy Finch took it upon herself to plan the wedding, insisting that Gila City deserved a proper celebration, and that Clara deserved to be fussed over. "You may have come here with nothing, but you are one of ours now, and we take care of our own," she declared. And Clara found herself being measured for a dress, and consulted on flowers and food, and 100 other details she had never imagined would be part of her wedding day. The month passed with impossible speed, and suddenly it was the morning of the wedding, and Clara was standing in Dorothy's spare room wearing a beautiful dress of cream-colored wool trimmed with lace, her hair pinned up and threaded with ribbons. She looked at herself in the small mirror and hardly recognized the radiant woman staring back at her. "You look lovely, dear," Mrs. Carver said, adjusting Clara's veil. "Xander is not going to know what hit him." "I am nervous," Clara admitted. "Not about marrying him. I am absolutely certain about that. Just nervous about standing up in front of everyone, being the center of attention. You will do fine. Just remember that everyone out there loves you and wants this day to be special for you both." Mrs. Carver gave her a quick hug. "I am so glad I was on that stagecoach, so glad I got to meet you and be part of your story. You have become very dear to me, Clara, and you to me. I am going to miss you terribly when you continue on to Utah Territory. I will write, and perhaps I will come back to visit next year. I want to see how your school is progressing." Mrs. Carver smiled. "Now, no more tears or you will ruin your face. It is time to go marry that handsome cowboy of yours." The ceremony was held in the newly completed schoolhouse, which seemed fitting to Clara. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the simple wooden benches that had been built for students but today were filled with townspeople in their best clothes. Wildflowers gathered despite the winter season brightened the room, and someone had brought a fiddle and was playing a sweet melody as Clara entered on Henry Finch's arm since she had no family of her own to give her away. But she forgot all the details the moment she saw Xander waiting at the front of the room. He wore a new shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly trimmed, and the expression on his face when he saw her walking toward him made Clara's heart overflow with love. This was right. This was meant to be, and every hardship she had endured to get to this moment had been worth it. The circuit preacher who happened to be passing through the territory that week performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment and partnership resonating deeply with both bride and groom. When Xander took Clara's hands and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I vow to love you and cherish you for all the days of my life, to be your partner in building the life we both dream of, to support your work and your dreams, to keep you safe and make you laugh and remind you every single day how precious you are to me. You came into my life when I did not even know I was waiting for you, and now I cannot imagine a future without you in it. You are my home, Clara Coleman, and I will spend the rest of my life being worthy of the gift you have given me in choosing to be my wife." Clara's vows were equally heartfelt. "I vow to love you with everything I am, to be your partner and your friend, to build this life alongside you with courage and hope. You saved my life in that blizzard, but you did more than that. You saved my heart, my spirit, my belief that happiness was possible. You are the best man I have ever known, and I am honored and grateful to become your wife. Whatever comes, we will face it together, and that makes me brave enough to face anything." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Xander kissed her, the schoolhouse erupted in cheers and applause. Clara laughed against his lips, overwhelmed with joy, and Xander pulled her close and whispered, "You are home now, darling. Forever and always you are home." The reception that followed was rowdy and fun, with more food than Clara had seen in months and music that had everyone dancing despite the cold winter evening. She danced first with Xander, then with Henry and various other men from the community, and watched her new husband be congratulated by what seemed like every person in attendance. As the evening wore on, and the party showed no signs of slowing, Xander caught her hand and pulled her toward the door. "What do you say we slip away? I have a wife I would very much like to be alone with." Clara blushed but nodded, and they made their escape amid knowing laughter and good-natured teasing from the assembled guests. Xander had brought the sleigh, and they drove through the moonlit landscape back to his ranch, which would now be their ranch, their home together. The cabin looked beautiful in the silvery light, smoke curling from the chimney where Xander had left a fire banked that morning. He helped her down from the sleigh and then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms and carrying her over the threshold, making her laugh and cling to his neck. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hollis," he said, setting her down gently in the middle of the room that already felt so familiar and dear. "It sounds strange hearing that name, but I like it." Clara looked around the cabin, seeing it with new eyes now that it was truly hers as well as his. "This is real, is it not? We are actually married, actually beginning our life together." "We are, and I promise you it is going to be a wonderful life. We will work hard and face challenges because that is the nature of this place and this time, but we will face them together, and that makes all the difference." Xander drew her close, his hand settling at her waist. "I love you, Clara. I will spend every day showing you how much. I love you too, more than I have words to express." They kissed then with the kind of passion that had been building between them for weeks, and Clara gave herself over to it completely, trusting this man who was now her husband, ready to begin the next chapter of their life together. The winter slowly gave way to spring, and with the changing season came new routines and rhythms. Clara's school opened in March with 12 students ranging in age from 5 to 14, and she threw herself into teaching with a passion that reminded her why she had chosen this profession in the first place. The children were eager and curious, and watching them learn and grow brought her immense satisfaction. Xander continued to build his ranch, adding cattle and making improvements to the land and buildings, with Clara often helping whenever she could spare time from her teaching duties. They worked well together, anticipating each other's needs and movements with the kind of synchronization that spoke to their deep connection. Mrs. Carver finally continued on to Utah Territory in April, but true to her word, she wrote regularly and made plans to visit the following year. Her departure was bittersweet for Clara, who had come to love the older woman like a favorite aunt, but she was happy that Mrs. Carver was finally reaching her destination and reuniting with her sister. As spring turned to summer, Gila City continued to grow. New families arrived, drawn by the promise of land and opportunity, and the settlement began to take on the character of a real town. There was talk of incorporating officially, of electing a mayor and establishing formal governance, and Clara and Xander found themselves at the center of these discussions as respected members of the community. In late June, Clara realized she was pregnant. The realization brought a mixture of joy and nervousness, as she had not anticipated starting a family quite so soon. But when she told Xander, his reaction left no doubt about how he felt. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure delight, and then set her down carefully as though she had suddenly become made of glass. "We are going to have a baby," he said wonderingly. "Clara, we are going to be parents. Are you happy about it?" She asked, though his reaction had already made that clear. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am thrilled, terrified, excited, all of it at once. He placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "A child, our child, it is almost too wonderful to believe." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Clara continued teaching through the fall, with the community rallying around her with advice and support. Dorothy Finch was a particular source of wisdom, having raised 5 children of her own, and she made sure Clara understood what to expect and how to prepare. As winter approached again, Clara reflected on how much had changed in the span of a single year. Last December, she had been traveling west to marry a stranger, lost and directionless and convinced that security was the best she could hope for. Now she was married to a man she loved deeply, carrying his child, teaching students who looked up to her, and part of a community that felt like family. The transformation was so complete, it sometimes made her dizzy to contemplate. Their son was born in late February during a mild spell between winter storms, and they named him Thomas Hollis after Xander's father, who had died when Xander was young. He was a healthy baby with a lusty cry and his father's blue eyes, and holding him for the first time, Clara felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect," Xander said, gazing down at his son with an expression of such love and wonder that Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You are perfect, both of you." Those early weeks of parenthood were exhausting and challenging, but they navigated them together with patience and humor. Clara had to take a break from teaching, but the community arranged for lessons to continue, with various parents taking turns instructing the children until Clara could return. Spring arrived again, and with Thomas tucked into a sling against her chest, Clara resumed teaching part-time while Xander adjusted his work schedule to be home more often. They found a rhythm that worked for their little family, And Thomas thrived, growing strong and curious and bringing endless joy to their lives. As Thomas approached his first birthday, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. And this time, Xander's reaction was more measured, though no less pleased. "We are going to have our hands full," he said with a grin. "Two under two, as they say. I know, but I am happy about it. I always wanted several children, a house full of life and love and laughter." Clara leaned into his embrace, feeling Thomas kick between them as he explored his father's face with chubby hands. "We are building something here, Xander. Not just a ranch or a school, but a real legacy, something that will last beyond us." "We are," he agreed. "And I thank Providence every day that you stumbled out of that blizzard and into my life. Best thing that ever happened to me, Clara Hollis." Their daughter arrived the following winter, a tiny, fierce creature they named Catherine, who made her opinions known from the very start. She was different from Thomas in temperament, more stubborn and demanding, and Xander joked that she had gotten her mother's determination along with her father's blue eyes. The years rolled on, each bringing new challenges and joys. The school continued to grow, eventually requiring Clara to hire an assistant teacher to help manage the expanding enrollment. Xander's ranch prospered, becoming one of the larger operations in the territory, and he took on hired hands to help with the work. Thomas and Catherine were joined eventually by two more children, a son named James and another daughter named Elizabeth, and the cabin that had once seemed spacious was expanded twice to accommodate their growing family. Gila City evolved into a proper town with a marshal and a church, and even a small hotel for travelers passing through. The railroad came through when Thomas was 10, bringing new opportunities and connections to the wider world. Clara watched her students grow up and start families of their own, many of them choosing to stay in the area and raise their children in the community they had known all their lives. Through it all, through the hard winters and dry summers, through the setbacks and triumphs, through the thousand small joys and sorrows that make up a life, Clara and Xander's love remained constant. They still made each other laugh, still found time to steal kisses when the children were not looking, still talked late into the night about their dreams and plans and memories. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Xander took Clara back to the cabin where they had first met, which they had kept even after building a larger house closer to town. It was summer, and the landscape was green and lush, so different from that frozen December day when she had stumbled out of the storm and into his arms. "You ever regret it?" Xander asked as they stood in the doorway looking out over the land they had built their life upon. "Giving up your original plans, staying here instead of going to Cheyenne?" Clara turned to look at him, this man who was somehow even more handsome at 48 than he had been at 28, silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines bracketing those remarkable blue eyes. "Never. Not for a single moment. You saved my life that day, Xander, but more than that, you gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and partnership and purpose. You gave me a home in every sense of that word." "You are home now, darling," Xander said, echoing the words he had spoken to her that first night. "And you always will be, for as long as we both shall live." They kissed in the doorway of that cabin where their story had begun, and Clara felt the same sense of rightness and belonging she had felt on their wedding day, on the day each of their children was born, on 1,000 ordinary days in between. This was her life, the one she had chosen and built with her own hands and heart, and it was everything she had never dared to hope for and more. The years continued to roll forward, bringing grandchildren eventually as Thomas married a girl from a neighboring ranch, and Catherine followed her mother's footsteps into teaching. James became a skilled rancher like his father, and Elizabeth surprised everyone by becoming interested in medicine and eventually going east to study to become a doctor before returning to practice in Gila City. Clara and Xander grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year into something solid and unshakable, tested by time and trial and found true. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, their home filled with laughter and love, and the sense of legacy fulfilled. On a clear spring morning just after their 45th anniversary, Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep with Clara holding his hand. The loss was devastating, like having part of her own soul torn away. But even in her grief, Clara found comfort in the life they had built together and the love that would endure beyond death. She lived another 7 years, teaching almost until the end, surrounded by family and the community she and Xander had helped build. On her deathbed at 75, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, Clara's last words were about Xander. "I am ready," she whispered, "ready to go home to him. Tell him I am coming." And as her eyes closed for the last time, those gathered around her could have sworn they saw her smile, as though she saw something wonderful waiting just beyond the veil. They buried her next to Xander on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, and the entire town turned out for the funeral. The stories told that day spoke of 2 lives well lived, of love that had transformed not just 2 people but an entire community, of the legacy left behind in children taught, land tended, and hearts touched. Thomas, now in his 50s and gray-haired himself, spoke at his mother's funeral about the night of the blizzard when she had stumbled out of the storm and into his father's life. "My parents believed that there was no such thing as chance, that my mother was meant to find that cabin and my father was meant to be there waiting. They believed their meeting was destiny, and looking at the life they built together, the love they shared, the family and community they created, I think they were right. That blizzard did not just blow my mother off course. It blew her exactly where she needed to be, to the man who would love her and cherish her and build a life with her that became an example for all of us." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "My father used to say that my mother was his home, and she always said the same about him. They found in each other what we all search for, a place to belong, a person to love, a reason to keep going even when times are hard. They showed us what partnership looks like, what commitment means, what love can become when it is tended and nurtured over a lifetime. And that is the legacy they leave us. Not just land or buildings or even family, but the example of how to love well and live fully." As the sun set over Wyoming Territory that evening, casting long shadows across the graves of Clara and Xander Hollis, the community they had helped build continued on, generation after generation carrying forward the values and love that 2 people had brought to a wild frontier so many years before. The school Clara had started still stood, much expanded and updated but bearing a plaque that read Clara Coleman Hollis Memorial School in honor of its founder. The ranch Xander had built still operated, run by James and his children, the land well tended and productive. And sometimes, on winter nights when the wind howled and snow fell thick and fast, people in Gila City would tell the story of the woman who arrived in a blizzard with nowhere to go, and the waiting cowboy who had said, "You are home now, darling," and of the great love that had grown from that desperate, frozen beginning into something that touched countless lives and lasted beyond death itself into legend and memory and hope. The end.